Good morning, welcome to BBC News. I'm Victoria Derbyshire. Here are the headlines this Tuesday morning. What is the government going to do for you? Today is the Queen's speech, when the monarch reads out what the government plans to do. It's promising a skills revolution for England, with loans for adults wanting to retrain and more powers to deal with failing colleges. Also on the agenda, a ban in England and Wales on so-called conversion therapy, covering sexuality and gender identity. But a consultation will happen first. Have you gone through gay conversion therapy? What was it like? Did it change you from being gay to straight? Have you carried out this kind of therapy? If so, why? Do let me know this morning on Twitter or Instagram. It's @VicDerbyshire, or email victoria@bbc.co.uk. Also today, a 21-year-old man has been charged with the murder of the police community support officer, Julia James. Breaking news this hour from Russia, where there are reports of a shooting at a school in the city of Kazan. It's thought at least 11 people have died. A dramatic escalation of violence as Israel launches bombing raids on military targets in Gaza. More easing of lockdown restrictions in Scotland, where it's likely people will be allowed to meet in each other's homes in limited numbers from Monday.
I was getting kinda used to being so alone.
And it's the Brits tonight in front of a live audience at London's O2 Arena with no masks and no social distancing. Good morning. Boris Johnson is promising a skills revolution for England as one of a host of policies due to be announced in today's Queen's speech, which sets out the government's programme for the next year. It's part of the state opening of Parliament, a usually pretty grand ceremony that's been pared back this year, obviously because of the pandemic. It's expected that the government will introduce loans for all adults who want to go to university or college at any point in their lives. Businesses will be encouraged to form partnerships with education providers to meet local needs in industries like construction. And the Education Secretary will have more powers to deal with failing colleges. The speech is also expected to commit the government to introducing a legal ban on so-called gay conversion therapy in England and Wales after a public consultation. That's according to the BBC. Plans to overhaul the UK's post-Brexit asylum system will feature in the speech. Under previously announced plans, people seeking protection as refugees would have their claim assessed based on how they arrive in the UK. New legislation to deliver an overhaul of England's planning system is also expected to be included, replacing case-by-case assessment of planning applications with a new zoning system. Ministers say it will help councils meet new house building targets by speeding up the whole process. And the government's expected to reiterate its long-standing pledge to reform how adult social care in England is funded. But there's been no confirmation as to whether specifically a new bill on funding will be introduced. It's unlikely, I think. The Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, said the speech would contain measures to strengthen social care provision.
Well, it is a big issue. There's a number of significant injustices in the way that social care is organised right now. One is that some people, about 1 in 10, have these very, very high costs, and it's very hard to know in advance who that is. It could be you, it could be me, it could be anybody watching. And so making sure that together as a society we can help people with those costs is important. The other thing that's very important is that at the moment, we put more money into the system each year. We put an extra £1 billion in last year. But really, I think as a society, we should really look after people in their older age. And it is at the moment something that we need to put more resources into. And then another part of it is that sometimes people end up in a care home when actually if you had the support for them to live at home for longer, then they'd be better off and healthier, and that'll be better for everybody. So there's a whole series of changes that will need to be looked at.
We will talk to the Chief Executive of Care England a little later on, because Boris Johnson actually said on the steps of Downing Street, you may remember when he was elected, I'm announcing now on the steps of Downing Street that we will fix the crisis in social care once and for all with a clear plan we have prepared. We'll talk to Martin Green after 10. Meanwhile, Labour's Shadow Foreign Secretary Lisa Nandy told BBC Radio 4 this morning she hoped the government would start delivering on its manifesto commitment of levelling up.
I hope so. I really hope so. I want the government to succeed in this, but it's been 11 years that they've had to actually level up areas like mine in Wigan, and what we've seen is lots of talk about it, but very little action. It's great to hear that they want people to be able to retrain, but where are the jobs that people need, the good quality jobs, not just the jobs, but the good quality jobs that allow people to earn decent money, to look after their families and to be able to spend in their local communities and on their high streets, that sustain all of the things that we really care about. That's what we need to hear from the government today. I hope that they come forward with a plan. So far we've had very, very little in detail about whether they have a plan or not.
Let's talk to our political correspondent, Jonathan Blake, who is at Westminster. So why no social care plan?
I think it's just such a difficult issue, Victoria, that the government hasn't yet managed to come forward with a plan to deal with. And the main reason for that, frankly, is the amount of money that it's going to cost. We've heard, as you heard there, the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, talking about the cost involved with meeting the demand for social care and reforming that system in England. Will it be a new tax? Will people be required to make more contributions if they earn more money or have more assets? The solutions simply aren't there at the moment. There are some solutions which have been worked out in review after review, which this government and previous governments have held into what to do about this crucial issue, but it seems that government departments can't yet agree among themselves how it should be funded and how it should be taken forward. So it is a nettle that the government will need to grasp at some point. As you outlined just now, Boris Johnson made that promise, that pledge on his first day as Prime Minister on the steps of Downing Street to sort it out once and for all. But beyond a mention in this Queen's speech, we are not going to get detailed plans. And so that, for many people, really is the gaping hole in today's Queen's speech, which we'll hear a little later on this morning.
And what are the other priorities, or what are the priorities as far as the government is concerned for the next year?
Well, I think what we'll hear today is post-Brexit, post-pandemic, although it's not quite behind us yet, the government trying to get back to its original agenda. And that, as we've been saying this morning, is its promise to level up. What does that phrase mean? Well, Boris Johnson and ministers talk about it as the government aiming to redress the imbalance of inequality that exists in some parts of the UK. And that is why the centrepiece of today's shopping list of legislation, if you like, which is what the Queen's speech really is that promise to offer student loans for anybody at any time during their life to undertake 4 years of further or higher education study. Now, that is a promise which is not particularly controversial. It's hard for anyone to disagree with, and so that is why the government is putting that front and centre, and it will allow ministers to claim that they are beginning to deliver on their promise to address inequality in parts of the UK. Beyond that, though, there will be some political flashpoints, some trickier issues which the government is trying to tackle here with legislation that it's bringing forward for the next session in Parliament. Planning reform, which ministers hope will allow more homes to be built and to speed up the development process, but nevertheless controversial because some claim councils and communities will be cut out of the decision-making process. And also the Borders Bill, which will change the way asylum claims are processed. So far, human rights groups and others have criticised the government's plans there, so that could make for a tricky passage through the Commons when it eventually comes forward.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Let's talk a little bit more about social care provision now. Carolina Gerlich is Chief Executive of the Care Workers Charity. Hello to you. So, first of all, I'll just explain what social care is, because people who want to learn more need to know exactly what we're talking about.
Social care supports people to live the lives they want to live, whether it's at home, in a care home, in supported living services, or in retirement living.
And at the moment, who pays for that?
At the moment, it's a split between people self-funding or local authority covering some of the costs, depending on individual finances.
What do you want the government, any government of any colour, because it's, you know, no one has gripped it yet, to do in terms of helping people fund their social care when they get older?
I think, first of all, there needs to be a better understanding of the importance of social care and the role it plays in the society, and the fact that everybody's lives matter. So we really need to support people who need social care to be able to get the care that they need at the level that they need. The government needs to put a lot more funding behind social care. The workforce needs to be recognised as highly skilled and professional. We need to put a robust training framework in place to enable care workers to really support people better. And we really need to get the society to recognise, appreciate and respect social care the same way it does the healthcare.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, people use the example, and it's one that takes us to the heart of the difference between the way we approach healthcare and social care. If you are elderly and you have cancer, your care on the NHS, you don't have to pay for it. You don't have to sell your house to pay for those costs. But sometimes with social care, you may have to sell your house to pay for that. And your argument is that's just unfair.
Well, I think we definitely need to find a way to fund social care better. But I don't think it's necessarily by making people get rid of all of their assets. And also, when you look at the other side of the spectrum, people who don't have any assets, their access to social care at times is very poor because there is so little funding in local authorities for social care. So there are many people out there who have need of support of social care that can't access it because there isn't enough provision in place.
And should that funding come ultimately from the taxpayer? You know, should we have a penny on income tax, a penny on national insurance to pay specifically for social care? What do you think?
I think as a society, we definitely have to recognise that social care is everybody's responsibility and the same way healthcare is. And we need to find a sustainable way to fund it over the next generations to make sure that everybody's got access to it. And that people who work in it, care workers, get paid a fair wage. At our charity last year, we had to support over 3,200 care workers with their finances because working on minimum wage, they were really struggling with their personal finances and basics like bills and food. And that's unacceptable for the workforce that's there to support the well-being of others.
The Prime Minister 2 years ago, 24th of July 2019, said he had a clear plan. We have prepared. What do you think about the fact that we haven't seen that yet?
I think the time is now to fix it. We really can't wait any longer. Obviously, COVID has delayed certain things, but at the same time, it has really shone a light on how important social care is. So right now, everything needs to come together and a very robust and strong reform has to happen to make sure that social care survives after COVID and that we are supporting people that need help.
Thank you very much, Kalina Gerlich, who is Chief Executive of the Care Workers Charity. A 21-year-old man has been charged with the murder of police community support officer Julia James. Ms James was found dead in woodland near her home in Kent on April the 27th, having suffered severe injuries. Callum Wheeler from Aylsham will appear before magistrates today. Simon Jones is in Aylsham in Kent for us. Bring us up to date, Simon.
Well, Julia James was killed 2 weeks ago today. She'd been out walking her dog when she was attacked. Since then, hundreds of officers have been working round the clock on the murder investigation. And late last night, we had confirmation that a 21-year-old man had been charged with her murder. Callum Wheeler, who's from Aylsham, lives here in the village. He will appear before magistrates in Medway later on this morning. Now, after news of this court appearance emerged, Julia James's cousin on social media thanked the police and everyone who'd been involved in the investigation, saying the family really appreciated it. We also heard from Kent Police, who said that officers had been working non-stop on this case. Police thanked other forces who've sent personnel here to help with the fingertip searches of local fields. It's a very rural area. Officers have also been helping with door-to-door inquiries, and the National Crime Agency have been involved too. Now, police also thanked the local community for the information that they have offered in this case. I think police recognise this has been a difficult couple of weeks for the local community. Obviously very, very difficult for Julia James's family too, and challenging for the police as well. But the police are continuing to appeal for information, and the searches are continuing. Yesterday afternoon, we saw hundreds of officers descend on a small rural lane, carrying out searches by the roadside of a local field. and people here are being told those searches are likely to continue for several more weeks, despite the court appearance expected later this morning.
Thank you very much, Simon. At least 11 people have died after a shooting at a school in the southwestern Russian city of Kazan. Police said 2 people had carried out the attack. 1, a teenager, has been detained. Emergency services are at the scene. And we'll bring you more on this as we get it. In fact, we can talk right now to our correspondent Steve Rosenberg, who is in Moscow. Steve, what else can you tell us?
Victoria, it's still quite a confused picture. What we know is that this morning, at least 1, possibly 2 people opened fire inside School 175 in Kazan in central Russia. Emergency services and the security forces rushed to the scene. We believe that security forces have now stormed the school. There are reports that one of the shooters, one of the gunmen, has been detained by police. He's said to be 19 years old, possibly a former student of the school. There are other reports which say that the second gunman, if there was one, has been killed. As for casualty figures, a lot of confusion. Some early reports suggested at least 6 children had been killed. That figure is expected to rise through the morning. But the regional official in Tatarstan, that area of Russia, says the operation has now finished. The school has been stormed. And now it's a question of working out how many people have been killed and injured. I've seen quite dramatic mobile phone footage from the scene which showed children climbing out of windows, climbing down ladders to get out of that school, and some injured children being treated on the ground outside the school. More of that will come in through the morning, I'm sure.
Steve, for the moment, thank you. We'll be back with you for any updates. Steve Rosenberg in Moscow. Nicola Sturgeon is expected to announce a little later that there will be a further relaxation of restrictions in Scotland. The First Minister is likely to announce that 4 people from 2 households will be allowed to meet indoors from next week. Cinemas and bingo halls are also expected to be given the green light to reopen, and outdoor contact sport will resume. Apple is facing a £1 billion lawsuit after being accused of overcharging UK customers who use its App Store. The action is being filed today on behalf of nearly 20 million people. The lawsuit claims that Apple is abusing its dominant position in the market by charging 30% commission on app sales. Apple said the legal action was meritless. Countries around the world are appealing for calm amid weeks of escalating violence between Israeli forces and the Palestinians. Militant groups in Gaza fired rockets into Israel on Monday evening. Israel responded with retaliatory strikes on the Palestinian territory that killed at least 20 people, including children. The past few days have seen the worst violence in Jerusalem for years. Our correspondent Yolanda Nell is in Jerusalem. Do bring us up to date with the latest, Yolanda.
Well, air raid sirens have been continuing to sound this morning in the Israeli communities close to Gaza, telling people to go to their bomb shelters. Over 200 missiles have been fired by Palestinian militants since yesterday afternoon. Several people were hurt in one apartment building, one of several buildings that was directly hit in the city of Ashkelon. The hospital there said it treated over 30 injured people. And then in Gaza, explosions have been shaking the buildings there. According to our colleagues, 150 airstrikes have been carried out by the Israeli military. It says it's been targeting militant areas, tunnels, weapon-making factories. It says it has hit 15 Palestinian militants. The Gaza Health Ministry is saying that 24 people have been killed altogether, a woman and her disabled son among the latest who have been killed. We've seen a number of children have been among the dead as well. So all of this really has ratcheted up the tensions. Hamas saying that it's acting to defend the Al-Aqsa Mosque after that site, which is holy to Muslims and Jews, was at the center of clashes between Israeli security forces and Palestinian worshippers over the past few days. There have been no reports of further violence there in the last few hours, but there are preparations for this to potentially go on for some days with the rhetoric on both sides. You look at what the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said, this could go on for some time. He said a red line had been crossed by Palestinian terrorist organisations when rockets were fired towards Jerusalem for the first time in 7 years yesterday.
Thank you very much. Here, the BBC understands that a public consultation will be opened before a ban on so-called conversion therapy, which is due to be announced in the Queen's speech. NHS England describes conversion therapy as an attempt to change someone's sexual orientation or gender identity. It's thought the consultation will consider religious freedom and how to protect professionals, including therapists. Campaigners say ministers must act fast and bring in a ban right across all settings. Equality advisor Jayne Ozanne, who resigned from a government advisory panel after accusing ministers of creating a hostile environment for LGBT plus people and being slow to act, told me how she survived conversion therapy.
So it affects all sorts of people, lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender people. And typically we all go through 3 phases. The first phase, which I went through, is the silent phase, where you carry this dark secret which you are terribly ashamed of, because often, in my case, my faith told me that I could not be gay, and yet I knew that the love that I longed for was from a woman. And that I carried for nearly 30 years. It took me to a very dark place. My body started to crack under the stress of it. I ended up sadly in hospital and having a full-blown breakdown. And at that point, I started to reach out, and that's often what happens to many others, either a breakdown or someone outs them, and they start asking for help from their religious friends. And in my case, I was in churches where many people offered to pray for me. They all believed that there was a reason why I was gay, that something had happened to me in my past, that my relationships perhaps with my close family members weren't as they should be. And basically every relationship you have, everything you've ever been through is unpicked by people who want the best for you and will pray into that situation, longing for you to be healed. And yet you know it's not working. And that is therefore your fault. You're not being open enough. You don't have enough faith. The problem is always left with you. And it took me to a very dark place again. Sadly, I then started to look for far more extreme forms of conversion therapy. I went through a load of exorcisms and deliverance ministries. I went to people who all thought they had special spiritual giftings in this area. I paid a lot of money for that too, all done in love with people who really wanted the best for me. But sadly, it didn't work again. And after 10 years of this, I found myself in hospital yet again with my body sadly cracking under the strain, the consultants trying to work out why I was so much pain, and going through a second full-blown breakdown where I longed, frankly, to die.
OK. The government is going to launch a consultation, and they are considering how to protect religious professionals. They are considering potentially exemptions for certain religious professionals when it comes to gay conversion therapy. What do you think of that?
I think that's absolutely outrageously awful. The government's duty is to protect LGBT people from all forms of conversion therapy, specifically the forms that we know are happening in Britain today. And that is happening in religious places by religious leaders. No exemptions should be given. The UN is absolutely clear that religious practices need to be included in this ban, because they are the primary form of conversion therapy. And to leave a door open is to consign many people, young and old, to a very dark future. And sadly, I know far too many who have attempted suicide and even have taken their lives because of this.
Be very interested to hear from you if you have experienced this kind of conversion therapy. Do send me an email. You can be anonymous, of course. It's victoria@bbc.co.uk. Let's talk now to Peter Lynas, who is the UK director of the Evangelical Alliance, which represents 3,500 churches. Hello to you, Peter Lynas. I mean, you just heard our last guest there say it's outrageously awful to consider exemptions for religious professionals. What do you say?
Yeah, look, the Evangelical Alliance is urging the government to do 2 things to honour both commitments that it has made. One is to end the harmful and abusive practices, and we've just heard Jayne talk about those, and rightly those should be ended. There are practices that were carried out by therapists, by the NHS, and admittedly by those in religious organisations that were wrong, and those should be stopped, and largely have. But we also, the government has said, it needs to safeguard spiritual support. So if somebody wants to go to a pastor, if they want to be prayed with, then they should be able to do that. That's something they should have the freedom to do. And we want to avoid the situation where somebody can be accused of conversion therapy simply for praying with somebody who's come along, who freely chooses and who asks for prayer. And so we're very supportive of the consultation because we need a clear definition. Otherwise, we're arguing in many ways at cross purposes about different definitions and different understandings of what's involved.
But if there are exemptions for religious professionals, then gay conversion therapy could still go on secretly.
Yeah, so I don't want exemptions in the way that's being framed. That's not what we're talking about here. The government has to honour these commitments. It has to find a space and a way in honouring spiritual support. I mean, this is standard pastoral support. So if somebody comes along and they want to be celibate and live a celibate lifestyle, for example, a priest or somebody, if they're heterosexual, I can pray with them where they may wrestle with that from time to time and they just may need support. But if that person was same-sex attracted and I did exactly the same thing, that would then be an offence. That's actually discriminating against somebody because of their sexual orientation, and it's discriminating against religious freedom. So I don't want a special exemption. That's exactly the wrong way to frame this. It is about honouring the two commitments and finding a way. And actually, I think that's perfectly possible to do by clearly well-drafted legislation. OK, but
even with clear, well-drafted legislation, it could mean that conversion therapy could still go on. Do you accept that?
Well, so it's all about the definitions. That's why we want a definition. Nobody wants to define what we mean by conversion therapy. So if there are harmful practices that have been done, if they're coercive, those things should absolutely be banned. But campaigners have pushed a very expansive definition, and Jayne was quite clear there. It includes prayer. That goes to quite fundamental ideas about people's ability to pray for somebody else, even if all the parties consent to doing that, even if they're all adults, even if they all freely agree. Jayne still thinks that should be outlawed.
Well, that's I think Jayne was, to be fair to Jayne Ozanne, she was specifically talking, that was my understanding, she was specifically talking about religious professionals praying to convert someone from being gay to being straight.
So this is where we need to get the definitions really clear. So we want to see real clarity that somebody can come along and they say, I would like to be prayed for X. It has somebody else. Have I got the freedom to pray with that adult as they come along and ask for that? That's why we're in favour of the consultation, because I think at the minute, actually, there's probably 90% of areas of agreement, the things that should be banned or probably already are banned. But we've also got to protect the rights of those who are same-sex attracted and want to make a different decision. Not everybody wants to make the same decision as Jayne, and the freedom of religion of those who want to pray. So we've got to find ways to do both. I think that's perfectly possible, and that's why we need clear definitions.
Thank you for talking to us. Thank you. Peter Lynas from the UK Evangelical Alliance. It's been closed for more than a year, but tonight the O2 Arena will welcome 4,000 fans to see performances by Dua Lipa, Rag & Bone Man and Arlo Parks at this year's Brit Awards. It's the biggest indoor live music event in the UK since the start of the pandemic, and because it's one of the government's pilot events, no masks will be required, no social distancing will be required, and people will be able to sing. Coldplay are going to open the show with a live performance of their new single from a pontoon on the River Thames. Have a listen. Selina Karim is an NHS COVID test processor and she's going to be there tonight. Hello, how are you feeling about it?
Hi, I'm feeling so excited. So excited.
What's the bit you're looking forward to the most?
For sure, the live music. I can't wait to experience that again. And with 4,000 other people, that's going to be amazing.
Are you going to feel any nerves at all with the fact that people aren't wearing masks, that there's no social distancing, that you can shout your head off if you want?
I mean, there are some risks, of course, but we're all going to be tested before entering the arena, of course. So I think it's safe. I'm not too nervous about it.
So how did you get a ticket?
I applied actually through a ballot and I was just chosen. It was pure luck. I was so lucky to get these tickets.
Because you have been, and tell us about your job in terms of processing tests yourself.
Right, so there was a few COVID centers that were held for my university, and yeah, I was a COVID test processor for them. It was a really interesting experience. I'm just very lucky to be able to help out in a situation like this.
Sure. So is the test that you've had, is it one of the swab tests, the gold standard PCR test?
It wasn't, well, basically, to enter the arena, we had to do one of the flow tests, which is just a really quick test.
The lateral flow,
you get the results in 30 minutes. Yeah, that one. And you get the results in 30 minutes, and that's the one that we need to show up on entry. But also, we will be required to take a PCR test today on the day and then 5 days later, just so they can see the effects of the event.
Okay. And you are studying interior design, I think. You're in your second year. Next year is your final year. Before the pandemic, have you been able to see any other live music in this country?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I love live music more than anything almost. So like obviously the reason I came to London was to study into, but also the idea of how many live music shows there are in London really attracted me to the city. I love the city so much. So that's also one of the reasons I wanted to live here, for the music. So I was very lucky to attend a lot of concerts before lockdown, and hopefully I'll be able to attend a lot more once they come back very soon.
Yeah. I think people are going to be sort of giddy when they arrive there tonight, because it's so, I mean, they did that big test gig in Liverpool, didn't they? A Blossoms gig. But this is going to be on a different scale with, you know, Dua Lipa and Coldplay and Lewis Capaldi and whoever else. It's going to be amazing. Of
course, 100%. It's going to be absolutely amazing.
Have a brilliant time, Selena, and stay safe.
Thanks for
talking to us. Take care. Thank you. Right, let's bring you a look at the weather now. Here's Carol.
Hello again. Rather like yesterday, we're in for another day of sunshine and showers, and some of those showers will be heavy and thundery with some hail embedded in them. Many of us started off on a dry note, but the showers have been going through the morning across southwest England, Wales, through the Midlands, East Anglia and southern counties, some of them pushing northwards through the afternoon as the rain continues to advance northwards across Scotland. In between there'll be some sunshine, temperatures 9 to about 16, maybe 17 degrees, and gusty winds around the showers as well. Now, through this evening and overnight, the showers continue to push northwards. They're rotating around an area of low pressure, so we'll see more coming in across parts of southwest England, Wales and into northwest England. But with all of this going on and the cloud, well, it's not going to be a cold night. We're not anticipating any issues with frost. And as we go through the ensuing few days, once again, we're looking at showers, some rain moving across the English Channel during the course of Wednesday, but in between, some sunshine.
Hello, this is BBC News with Victoria Derbyshire. Here are the headlines at 9:30. The government's preparing to set out its legislative programme for the next 12 months, with the promise of a skills revolution in England. A 21-year-old man has been charged with the murder of the police community support officer Julia James. At least 11 people have died during a shooting at a school in the Russian city of Kazan. Many of the victims are children. There's been a dramatic escalation of violence as Israel launches bombing raids on military targets in Gaza. More easing of lockdown restrictions in Scotland, where it's likely people will be allowed to meet in each other's homes in limited numbers from Monday. So the government will set out its plans for the new parliamentary session today. More than 20 bills will feature in the Queen's speech. The Queen effectively reads out the government's plans, and Downing Street says they will support the nation's recovery from coronavirus and build on its so-called levelling up agenda. Labour has called on the government to deliver action rather than rhetoric. So what can we expect to hear when it comes to clearing the backlog of non-COVID related illnesses and treatments? Let's talk now to Professor Andrew Goddard, who is President of the Royal College of Physicians. Hello to you, Professor Goddard. What do you need to help clear the backlog and catch up with the massive waiting lists?
Time, basically, and people. So what we've seen through the pandemic is that we really need to build on both our health and our social care workforce. And when we were short of that, for example, when the Nightingales were opened without staff, it became very clear that we haven't planned sufficiently for our health workforce.
OK, so you need money for more people?
Yes.
Are you going to get it?
I hope so. I mean, the trouble is there's going to be lots of competition for money, isn't there? Because following the pandemic, everybody is going to need to do some rebuilding. But I think what the pandemic has shown us clearly is that the challenges we've got of health inequalities in our country are so great that if we don't do something about it now, we're going to be running into problems for years and years to come.
So give us a sense of those inequalities then, and give us a sense of the scale of the backlog.
Well, everybody's seen it really on the newspaper and in the news during the pandemic. We've seen that COVID affected certain parts of our society far more than others. So the elderly, those from ethnic backgrounds, those from the poorest parts of our society. So those are the bits that we have to focus on. So when we're talking about levelling up, it's about paying special attention and investing in healthcare and social care to those parts of our society.
OK. There is going to be a health and social care bill. It will get rid of clinical commissioning groups, and I'll ask you to explain what those are in a moment, and it will replace them with integrated care systems. Please, could you explain that as well?
OK, so there are over 200 clinical commissioning groups, or CCGs they're called, which are basically the units whereby healthcare is bought within the NHS. And the problem with that is it creates what's so-called purchaser-provider split. So you have people who are providing healthcare, like hospitals and community hospitals, and the people who are buying it, which is the CCGs. Now, the idea with integrated care systems is that you bring everything together. So you have one system, so everybody owns the problem, and everybody therefore tries to co-own the solutions to doing that. So workforce will be part of that. So integrated care systems will have money to invest in training and workforce locally, but really when it comes to deciding how many nurses, how many doctors, how many physios, etc. we need, that really comes from above. That's from central funding, and that's where we need the focus.
OK. And what's your view on the fact that we're not expecting anything substantive when it comes to social care?
I think I'll be very disappointed, and I hope that we do need, because it's very clear, and it has been for a long time, that there are big differences between our healthcare system and our social care system. Everybody loves the NHS, and we remember the Olympics, and everybody really rallied behind the NHS during the pandemic. But social care is as important, if not more so, than our healthcare system. And investment in our social care system will actually take work away from our healthcare system, so that's a good thing. We have very different ways of funding the two systems. We have free at the point of entry for healthcare. We still have means testing for social care. So I've always said that the idea of a sort of a national care service would be a good thing. I don't think we're going to see that today. I think that'd be a step too far. But thinking about it sort of on the same level as healthcare would be a very good start.
What do you think what are the reasons why government after government has not tried to come forward with a proper social care plan? I mean, Theresa May had suggested whatever she suggested about social care before the 2017 general election, which got described as the dementia tax, so it had to be dropped. But what's the reason why it's so difficult? Is it money? Is it what? Tell me.
It's money, and it's just how far we've got to come. Because we haven't invested in it for so long, we've let the social care system slowly disintegrate. So the work that needs to be done to get it back up on a par with the healthcare system is huge, and that's going to take a lot of investment, and therefore you need to train people to do that, you need to get buildings inside, you need to have systems in, and then you have to work out a way which is fair for people and viewed to be fair when it comes to social care system. And at the moment it still is seen as very unfair that some people are having to spend large amounts of money on their own care when others are not.
How long do you think it's going to take, Professor Goddard, to catch up with the backlog which we now see because of the pandemic?
Good question. It depends which bit you're talking about. But if you're talking about the sort of the 4.7 million or whatever it is at the moment, people on waiting lists, it's going to take many years. And
how many years?
Well, at least 2 to 3, I would say. But the trouble is, we knew that waiting times were increasing really before the pandemic. So this isn't a thing that's suddenly happened during the pandemic. It's got worse after the pandemic by a lot. But this is a problem that has been developing for a while, and you saw all the work that was done in the 2000s about reducing waiting lists, and the latest Ipsos Mori poll, I think, showed that getting control of waiting lists was considered by the public to be the most important priority, above vaccination, above more staff and things like that. So waiting lists is a really important thing for the British people, and therefore I'm sure the government will do something about it, but it's going to take a long time, and I don't think we're going to get down to sort of the levels we saw in 2010-ish for a long time, and I think that'll take many years, and I think it'll be, so maybe 3 years, but maybe 5.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sobering thought to end on from Professor Andrew Goddard. Thank you. From the Royal College of Physicians. A coroner is due to deliver findings of a major inquest into the fatal shootings of 10 people during the conflict in Northern Ireland. It follows 2 decades of campaigning by the bereaved families. The killings happened in West Belfast over 3 days in 1971, and it's widely believed that they were all shot by the army. Our Ireland correspondent Chris Page has this.
Northern Ireland is a place where history still hurts. In 1971, the conflict was heading for its height. The army began to intern paramilitary suspects without trial. When the military operation started, there was widespread violence on the streets.
This is actually a photo of the day.
At this field in West Belfast, John Teggart's father, Danny, was shot dead by the army.
My dad he would have come into the field here.
Yes.
And then he started running across there. He got to here. When that's where he was first shot. He was shot in the leg, that brought him down. My daddy lay there. He was shot 14 times.
Danny Taggart was one of 10 people who died over 3 days. The others included a priest and a woman who had 8 children. According to their families, they were unarmed civilians, unjustifiably killed by soldiers.
From the very first bullet was fired at our loved ones, there's been lies, and the official verdict that our loved ones were gunmen, gunwomen, even the parish priest. So that's been official up until now. But the evidence of going forward, what we're doing, we intend to correct history, put the record straight.
Another victim was himself an army veteran. John McCurr lost a hand during fighting in the Second World War. He was shot while working as a joiner at a church.
We still cry. He's missed so much. My mum always said she didn't really want to believe it, and she always put it, she says, that he was killed by one of his own.
Those 10 killings here in West Belfast happened almost half a century ago. But the conflict in Northern Ireland went on for nearly 30 years. In this community and many others, it's left a deep legacy of loss, division and trauma. How do you investigate the thousands of unsolved deaths is a hugely sensitive issue. It's been reported the government is planning to, in effect, stop prosecutions in future of both the security forces and paramilitaries. This former soldier, who's a Unionist politician, is against the idea of an amnesty.
Justice should be blind, and the evidence is there. They should be investigating, regardless of who it is. But again, there is a truth to this, and the truth is that the terrorists were responsible for 90% of the killings, and the British state were responsible for 10%. I mean, I don't think we should balance this off. I think we should go where the evidence takes us.
The past becomes more difficult to resolve the longer time goes on. But today, the summer of 1971 will be in focus, along with 10 families who say, above all, they want the truth. Chris Page, BBC News, Belfast.
It's a condition that can lead to people wrongly being accused of being drunk or on drugs. But now a campaign is hoping to raise awareness of Huntington's disease and end the stigma around it. The hereditary disorder leads the body's nervous system to progressively deteriorate physically, cognitively and mentally until the person becomes dependent on the help of others. In a survey by the Huntington's Disease Alliance, 70% of those impacted by the condition said it had been extremely difficult or life-ruining, leading to the organisation to call for improvements in care for those affected. We're going to talk now to Olympic medalist and double world champion rower Sarah Winckless MBE, who tested positive for the gene that leads to the disease, and also to Ashley Clarke, who cares for her dad, Desi, who has the condition. Welcome both of you. Sarah, let me begin with you. Your mum had Huntington's and was diagnosed when you were in your early 20s. What was it like when she finally got that diagnosis?
For me, I think it was actually helpful because I got some language around what was happening in our family. So I started to be able to gain knowledge and understand what was happening, and I could learn about it and know what I was going to expect really for the future, for both for mum but also for the rest of us who were in those caring positions. How did Huntington's affect her life? Well, Mum was ill for nearly 30 years. She was absolutely incredible. She did as much as she could for as long as she could, and we kind of helped as we could as a family to make sure that happened. And our local community did it as well. But it was a real mood change in my teenage years. There was some of the memory pieces that she wouldn't quite remember what was going on, and just being able to organise things. I remember once she sent me a card and I looked at it and thought, oh, it must be from Mum, because she's only written one word in it, and she'd managed to get an envelope and put the address on it, but she hadn't remembered to write the card. So the order and sequencing for things for her was incredibly, incredibly hard. And then as I went to Athens in 2004, she was in a wheelchair and she wasn't able to travel to Beijing in 2008 because of her illness. So the progression was slow, but steady.
As a child of someone with Huntington's, you have a 50-50 chance of having the disease. Why did you want to get tested as soon as you could?
It was back to that knowledge. For me, knowledge is potential power. And if I could learn about my situation, it could give me some knowledge to make good choices. And I was in my 20s. I was at Cambridge. I was studying the brain. I was fascinated by it. And I was almost studying myself, if you like, as someone to see what would happen if I went through that process. I was incredibly well supported by Adam Brooks at the time, although obviously when I went in to get the final result, as I looked at the genetic counsellor, deep inside me I knew they didn't have good news, because the face that I met was one that said, I'm going to have to give you news that neither of us want to talk about today.
And how did you feel when you got the result that you will develop this disease?
Numb at first. I think I was a student, and I have to confess, I think my first words were, okay, should we go to the pub, let's have a drink. Because it was life-changing and not in the way I wanted it to be. But I've been incredibly fortunate. I found sport. I always had sport, but I think it took new meaning to me. Potentially with that diagnosis, it gave me incredible freedom to do as much as I could for as long as I could. And Mum was an amazing role model. She certainly didn't let the disease slow her down. And I really hope I won't, if and when I get ill, do the same.
Let's talk to Ashley now. Ashley, hello to you. I mean, you've looked after your dad, who's had Huntington's. Again, you started the testing process when you were 18, but you didn't finish it. Tell us why.
When I started the testing process, I was actually due to go away for that summer, and the way the time frame worked out and the appointments worked out, I would have been getting my results just before I left. So I didn't feel it was the right decision for me at that point. I wanted to do it at a time where I had my family and my friends there to support me and not be leaving the country for a number of weeks and months.
Sure. So do you know now or not?
No, I'm currently not tested. I've no idea.
Okay, and are you cool with that?
Yeah, at this point in my life, I'm happy enough. I definitely take every opportunity and every chance and try to make lots of memories. But I will get tested if I ever settle down and decided to start a family and all that kind of stuff. But at the minute, I'm happy enough. So
Sure.
I am.
Yeah. Now, you have been, I mean, your dad was diagnosed when he was 40, you were 14, you've looked after him since you were young, and there have been several occasions when you've been out with your dad and people have thought wrongly that he was drunk. What happened and what was that like for you both?
It was really hard. We always tried to protect Daddy and, you know, not let him hear or see anything like that. But it was really hard. You had to keep yourself like composed in some way and make sure that he was looked after, when sometimes you wanted to shout at the person, but obviously that's not the right thing to do. I tried to use it as a chance to educate these people and say, oh, well, actually, he has Huntington's disease and this is how it affects him and this is what it is. And I tried to educate them for like future. But yeah, it was really hard. Sometimes it was incredibly public and there was a lot of people, which it was upsetting. So it was, and we heard from friends, even when they would have dad out, it would happen them as well. People would be quite aggressive in a way, you know, telling him he shouldn't be somewhere, he shouldn't be doing something, things like that there, when it was the last wee bit of like, you know, enjoyment that Daddy had, maybe getting out to events and that.
Yes. And this is part of the campaign to end the stigma around Huntington's. What would you say to people who might see, I know your mum's no longer with us, Sarah, but let's say you've been out with your mum. Let's say, Ashley, you're out with your dad. They have Huntington's. They look different. They are acting differently. Their body is moving in different ways. People might stare. People might think they're drunk. What would you say to people that they should do? What's the advice?
I loved how Ashley was talking about it, actually, because it's about educating, it's about being curious. So rather than make assumptions about what's happening with that person, I remember on one occasion, Mum decided to show how well she was by doing press-ups in a shop and star jumps, and my brother and I were hiding behind a railing because we wanted to support her doing it, but we didn't want to be seen with her exhibiting that behaviour. And of course people are going to stare, because that isn't an ordinary thing to do in a shop. But be curious, wonder what might be happening to the family, maybe ask, is there anything I can do to support you? Can you tell me what's happening, rather than assume and think it's drugs or alcohol, because it may not be the case.
What would you say, Ashley?
I think it'd definitely be very similar. I was out with Dad one time, and we were eating lunch, and he struggled at that point with eating by himself. So I was feeding him, and I was in my early 20s, and Dad then went out to do a wee errand. I was keeping an eye on him from the window, and the lady came over to me, and she actually asked me, she was like, "What's wrong with him? Like, do you mind me asking?" And that to me was the nicest and the best thing that could have happened, because it gave me the opportunity to explain the disease and the condition. And that to me was a huge moment. So it would probably be like, let's not judge, let's not jump to a negative and straight away think the person is drunk or on drugs, and just ask the person, just say like, "Hey, is there anything I can do to help?" Or, you know, what seems to be, you know, like what's going on here, you know, because a lot of the time I do think we welcome the opportunity to educate rather than negative comments and very hurtful comments. So yeah, just ask, and we'd be happy to explain.
Thank you both so much. Thank you, Ashley Clarke and Sarah Winckless MBE. Thank you. Really good to talk to you both. Thank you. Cinemas in England, Scotland and Wales can reopen from next Monday, but some independent chains say the restrictions mean it's not viable for them to open their doors. Nina Warhurst reports.
Could this be 007's biggest challenge yet to save cinema? The release of No Time to Die has been delayed 3 times to ensure a big screen debut, and it's hoped by the autumn it will be the blockbuster that brings us back. But how many of us will be willing and financially able? Police! Especially since we've been spoilt rotten by top telly. 12.8 million of us sat down at the same time to watch the Line of Duty finale in our athleisure wear, if we wished, with cheap snacks, no hefty car park fees, and no irritating sound of strangers' popcorn.
If you laugh, you're telling the rest of the room that you're enjoying yourself, you're having a good time. If you scream, you're telling the rest of the room that you're scared. And it changes the colour, it changes the timbre of the experience for everyone in that room. And you can't really do that at home, not in the same way. And then when you come out, you've shared an experience with others. And I think that's really important, and cinema's going to need to remember that, because that's what it's about, the shared communal experience.
Welcome to Badlands Spa.
And is the cinema even synonymous with big cinematic moments anymore? This year's big Oscar winner, Nomadland, made on a moderate budget, can already be viewed on Disney+, where a month's subscription is less than the price of one adult cinema ticket. And that's why some smaller venues say they have no choice but to wait till we're packed in for Bond, James Bond, before they can fully reopen.
We're a little cinema of 194 seats that are all close together. We're not one of these with the luxury seats, so we can't spread out as much as some, and we didn't get any funding to help subsidise our losses. So we really need to wait for the blockbusters and to operate to as close to possible as full capacity. People queue down the street to get in a nice, orderly British fashion, and it's really cramped in there, so it would be impossible to do the distancing.
There is no feeling like sitting back in that big red chair ready for the magic, but film lovers will need to feel safe, physically and financially, to regularly savour this treat again.
That minke whale calf that became stranded in the River Thames has been put down, sadly. The animal was first spotted struggling near Richmond Lock on Sunday. Despite rescue attempts to save the whale, the decision was taken to euthanise yesterday afternoon after it became stuck a second time. Vets say it was the only way to prevent further suffering. A man in China was left dangling from a bridge after some of its glass panels blew away in high winds. He was visiting the 100-metre-high structure in the Pian Mountain in the northeast of the country when this happened. I mean, look at that. He managed to get back to safety with the help of on-site staff and was not injured. Thank goodness. Right, let's bring you a look at the weather forecast here. Here's Carol.
Hello again. Yesterday, some of us saw some torrential downpours, and actually for the next few days, the forecast remains unsettled with some slow-moving downpours with hail and with thunder. In between there'll be some sunny spells, and it will feel warm in that sunshine. Low pressure is dominating our weather not just today, but in the next few days, and the circulation around that is in an anti-clockwise direction, so we're going to see a lot of showers. This is the rainfall accumulation chart. You can see the darker blues. Here's the key. So as we go through this week, some parts of the UK could see 30 millimetres of rainfall, some maybe a bit more than that. Today we started off on a dry note with a fair bit of sunshine. Our rain pushing northwards will continue to do so through the rest of the day, and the showers will continue to develop across England and Wales. Fewer in Northern Ireland, but around those showers we'll have gusty winds, and some of them will have hail and thunder and lightning in them as well. Temperatures 9 in Lerwick to 16, maybe 17 as we push farther south. In the sunshine, out of the showers and the wind, well, 17 will feel quite pleasant. Through this evening and overnight, you can see how the showers push northwards into Scotland, but we do have that rotation going on, so there'll be further showers coming in across Wales, getting into northern England, and with a lot of cloud around too. Well, it's not going to be a cold night. There shouldn't be any issues with frost anywhere. So as we head through tomorrow, we still have that same low pressure and we still have a lot of showers rotating around it. It's not going to be as windy tomorrow for some of us, so the showers will be slow moving, and at the same time we've got a system coming in across the English Channel bringing in some rain. In between, some sunshine with top temperatures up to about 16. Thursday remains unsettled, no frost overnight. Again, a lot of dry weather to start the day with a few showers, but further showers will develop through the day, and again, they're likely to be slow moving. Temperatures down a touch, the range 9 to about 14 degrees. On Friday, there still is quite a bit of dry weather to start the day, some sunshine, variable amounts of cloud, but then the showers do get going. But it looks like we've got another system coming into the southwest. The timing of this could change. It may not get as far north as this through the course of the day. But after that, the outlook does remain unsettled. We're looking at rain or showers, but again, some sunshine.
The BBC World Service has always been something that has just given me a sense of anchoring wherever you go, that it's always accessible.
BBC World Service has been my compass. We need news that give us facts that doesn't distort our world.
I want news, I want science, I want facts, giving me the information so that I can make up my own mind.
The World Service definitely keeps people informed, and I love it.
Bringing the world closer, the BBC World Service.
What makes a photograph great? Something beautiful? No, it's how you look at the subject. Take something ordinary, make it extraordinary. Go abstract, try a different angle, a different perspective, a new technique. It's not just about what's in front of the camera, but who's behind it. Join me, Rankin, for a masterclass in picture taking as myself and 6 students embark on the Great British Photography Challenge. Coming soon to BBC 4.